And as I counted the cost and I looked at how miserable I was, and I kind of looked at the future misery if I continued in this way, I was like, that's not actually a cost I'm willing to pay. I don't think that's a cost that a loving God would want me to pay. And I was getting really pissed off with some of my Christian friends who knew I was struggling with my sexuality. And they said, well, it's just the sacrifice you're going to have to make for following Jesus. And I went, well, explain to me what sacrifice you're making. You're straight, you get to have sex, you get to do all these things. What sacrifice are you actually making to follow Jesus? I don't see it. I was like, it's not comparable.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today I have with me a special guest from the United Kingdom. I think the first UK guest. Welcome, Lewis Crompton. You are a financial advisor on YouTube and do a lot of other things. I probably need some of that because I do not have much of a financial plan. We need to work on the 401k. But thank you so much for being here. Happy to have you.
Absolute pleasure, yes. Not quite a financial advisor. I haven't passed all those sorts of exams, but I do teach people how to be better with their money and how to double their money in 12 months using very, very simple investment strategies that only take 30 minutes a day.
Well, and yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, you have a master's degree. It just was in theology, which, like me, we got ministry training and now don't seem to be using it. But financial advice is also very useful, and you can change people's lives a lot through there. But but you're not here to talk about that, although I'm sure a financial advice episode would probably be useful for a lot of our people, especially, actually, that's a whole nother segue, because like a lot of us that were very heavily in ministry aren't the best with finances because we were just like, God's gonna figure out all our financial needs. So my family was not like financial planners. I'm not much financial planner. But that's not this episode. That will be for another time. The crazy thing about your story is you went through conversion therapy, and you were deeply, deeply in the church, and now you are happily married to a man. And so you so graciously offered to give us that story of how that all happened, and I want to thank you for that. And also, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to take it from the top. What led you to start realizing you were gay, and was that in your childhood, teenage years? I'd love to hear that part of your story.
Yeah, I was thinking about that before coming on to this episode, and when did I actually realize I was gay? And I don't think I did properly for a long time, and that question though prompted a memory as I was brushing my teeth. Even though this is online, I always brush my teeth beforehand. It's like a force of habit. And the memory that came to mind was the first time somebody asked me if I was gay. And oddly enough, it was at Saturday theatre school, because I liked to sing and dance.
Weird.
That was the first clue, yeah. And it's also actually one of the reasons why I loved being in church, because I could sing and I could dance every weekend and no one thought anything of it. But I remember this kid asking me on that Saturday if I was gay, and I had this internal automatic fear-based response. And I'd never been asked that question, I'd never even thought about it, but I kind of knew that the answer was yes, and I couldn't really explain why, and it never really materialized into language or words at that point, but that kind of set the tone for this uncomfortable feeling around all things sexuality for the entirety of my teenage years and early 20s. So I think that's when I kind of had a bit of a sense. People would always call me gay. Growing up, when I went to university, people would call me gay, and I just denied it. I didn't believe it. I had a couple of sexual experiences with guys, nothing major, just a bit of heavy petting. I'll keep it PC if parents ever listen to this.
Heavy petting is a term I've heard a lot of terms. Heavy petting is one I have never actually heard, except in a very niche world. But
well, there you go. I don't think I kissed a guy until I was 19. And that was, just full of shame, because there were also somebody who was in the church. So that was very, very strange. And got shut down very, very quickly on both our sides. And then it was when I was in my early 20s, I started to realize there might be a problem with me in terms of my sexuality. And that's what I believed it to be. So I remember being on the Underground, which is the London metro system, for anyone who doesn't know. And the problem with your sexuality is when you push it down, it ends up just getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and it comes out in all these different weird and sometimes wonderful, sometimes not wonderful ways. And I found myself sat on the underground, and it was a busy train. I was sat down, and there was this guy stood in front of me, and he just had the most perfect buttocks you've ever seen in your life. And I had this overwhelming compulsion to bite his bum. And I didn't. I knew where I was, time and place. And so I didn't do it.
The story's about to go a totally different direction, and that's when you spent 3 years in jail for biting a butt, which would be another story.
Yeah, that'd be a different one. Yeah, story for another day. But I didn't do that. But I got off the train. I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, how have I got this overwhelming desire, almost uncontrollable, to behave in this way? And so that's kind of where I took that to my church leaders at the time, and I started going through this process of inner healing to deal with any trauma, generational cleansing to clean through any of my generational line, basically various forms of conversion therapy, trying to get rid of demons from me, to make sure that I could live a straight life. And in the midst of all of that, I was trying to date women, trying to meet women, trying to be set up with women, and it just never felt natural. Whenever I would meet in the big bad real world a gay person, it would automatically be natural and feel easy and feel just, it flowed very, very well. But I was ignoring all of that as I was going through this process.
Yeah. So you're trying to date women, it's just not feeling natural, and I can relate to that, and it should. And then being around men, it's just, you feel it, it comes naturally, it's like you hear. So yeah, that's very similar story here. But so you're struggling with all this. So you were trying to stay on the straight and narrow path. Straight. Whenever I say straight and narrow path now, it's always a joke to me. I'm like, straight path. Got it. But you basically put yourself in these programs. So what kind of programs were you in? Now you're talking to a spiritual church counselor who's taking you through this, or where'd you find this person? What started that?
Yeah, so the church I was part of in the UK was connected with a church in the US. I mean, the whole rhetoric from my Christian journey was always that gay was wrong, gay was sinful, it wasn't what God wanted. So I was part of many different churches over my time, but when this particular conversion therapy, which they wouldn't call conversion therapy, they would just call it them trying to help me. And I always want to be quite careful with how I say things, because they're not doing it from a place of maliciousness whatsoever. They are so convinced this is a loving act to help me not be that way. So convinced. So the church I was part of at that time in my life were very, very spiritual, which is why we got into all the kind of demonic stuff and the angelic stuff. And they were partnered with a church in America, which is where I actually trained as a counselor, as a therapist as well, in my late teens, 18, 19 years old, because I wanted to help people. And so they were just doing what I wanted to do, helping, but in a way which became more and more difficult. I became more and more aware that it was not working, and it was not changing things for me. And I kept going harder and harder into that world, to the point that with that church in America, I actually became ordained as I was working through this process. Wow.
So you're fully in, fully set, bought in. Now you were going through a counseling program to become a church counselor. Now, and again, like, I know I have the same relationship with people in these churches. They do really feel sincere and like they're helping people. And you can't blame the hearts, I think, what I've been kind of processing through, because I'm still figuring out how to feel towards these people myself as well. Like, how do you be mad at someone that's just trying to help you and believes fully that they are doing God's work and trying to help a human that's going into like a demonic path? But at the same time, when do we hold people accountable for watching people suffer and having such a strong religious lens that they can't see all these people in pain and all these programs that aren't working, and not observe that and seek to maybe rethink things and change things? So it's like it's nuance. There's no perfect answer, like a lot of things in religion and post-religion, but it's like, no, I feel like I'd like to think if I was one of those people mentoring a 19-year-old boy who's miserable and none of this is working, I'd hopefully have some sort of shift in the way I thought. But we don't know if we would, if it was us. But back to you. So with these therapists, are they licensed psychologists, or they're just church ordained, church counseling
Just
certified,
church-ordained
whatever?
counselors, yeah.
So you have basically, not to like come in at them, and I know you're trying to be nice to them, but you have unlicensed therapists giving you pretty heavy advice and therapy, as well as spiritual counseling, and they have no degrees in that field.
In that field, yeah. I mean, there may have been one or two that did also have those, but
Yeah.
they did this alongside that. I will say that one of my church leaders at the time realised that I wasn't in a good way, and so recommended true counselling and therapy work, which I also put myself through. But this is how warped it was. So when they first recommended that, it was kind of for the purpose of conversion therapy. And the person who they connected me with was a Christian, but refused to work with me because if they got found out for doing conversion therapy in an actual clinical setting, then they would be struck off. So they decided not to. And I was so angry and so upset and felt so despondent that this one last lifeline to save me from my sexuality was now taken away because of the UK government saying conversion therapy wasn't okay. So that's how much I was in this world and bought into that same religious lens. And I think going back to your question before and kind of what you're thinking about processing, you're right, there's no easy answer to that. And I think it's incredibly difficult. And I've never really pondered that question much, but if I do ponder it briefly for a moment, it's hard to keep people accountable when yes, people need to be kept accountable, but their worldview is almost, I don't know, it's unchangeable, it's unshakable. Like their value system is so heightened to the Word of God in their perception of what the Word of God is so all-encompassing. It is the truth, the only truth. There's no wiggle room. How can they have any other outworking in their behavior when they have that in place? And the other tricky thing with that is we don't know what's gone on in their lives emotionally, mentally, and everything like that, which causes them to hold on to that so tightly. Because as I kind of unpack a lot of what's happened in my life and why I bought in so heavily to the church, I didn't realise I had loads of childhood trauma that only came up later on in my life through recovered memories. And it's so obvious a pattern to see why I picked a religious context, a heavily religious context, where everything was black and white, because that black and white created safety for me in my own being. Now I don't need that, as I've worked through a lot of that pain, trauma, everything like that, because I can hold and handle dichotomies of truths where I couldn't before, and I needed that black and white. So it's very, very hard to hold people accountable, is maybe the wrong word to use there, but break people out of that cycle and that way of thinking is incredibly difficult when it's so ingrained for multiple reasons.
Yeah, I think when we are in this environment our whole lives, it's so hard to question something when you're a kid, and then it becomes a part of your community and your whole world is centered around these ideas. So questioning them isn't really feasible unless you want to shake everything and shake the boat. And also it's really, especially when you're younger, like what 18, 19-year-old wants to question their fundamental beliefs about what is the meaning of life and what, like, there's so much purpose in faith, and there's beautiful elements of faith that our hearts latch onto. And I think, especially even as gay men, I think we latch on to faith because a lot of us are very sensitive and we feel things, and faith just does really stick to that. And so you have to feel like you're going to lose all of that to follow everything else that's been painted as evil by that. So it's very hard to get over that journey. And you're obviously a very not like intelligent, well-spoken individual. And I think I'm going to say about myself, which sounds bad, but I think I am a big thinker as well. I think through things, but it's actually quite crazy that people that are very heavy thinkers like us still had such a hard time reasoning this. It's almost like there's a mental block around this. Like there was for me, it's just like logic doesn't quite work when you're thinking everything through a very religious lens. Like you're just not allowed to come at it straight with this should be this way because this is that way and this is that way. It's like, no, faith is about God not having not having all the rules, but and you just have to trust him, and it really disarms you from actually thinking through things and really unpacking it for yourself.
Yeah, completely. It really does. And I think one of the beautiful things about church is, and probably why you have a podcast in some way, and probably why I do what I do in some way, is because church and religion gives you a purpose and it gives you a mission. And I think most human beings are wired to have a purpose, have a mission of some description. Now, some people make that their sports team. I felt very gay to say sports team rather than picking a particular, like a football team or something like that.
Oh no, you're British. Everybody's just thinking about that. So you're fine.
But that's what they do. So they wrap up their whole identity, they wrap up their whole personality, their
Absolutely.
whole purpose in supporting this team and this cause and this mission. And when I left the church, I felt so adrift because I basically went into a depression for a while because I was like, well, what am I even doing? Like, I'm kind of trying to figure out my sexuality. Am I bi? Am I gay? I don't even know what I want because I've spent years hiding what I wanted from myself, let alone everybody else. My family, when I first came out to my friends, my family still didn't know that I was gay, so I'm not even my true self to them. What even is my true self? Because it's been so wrapped up in this church identity. I had international recognition within the church because of the type of counselling work that I did, and I was very good at it, according to other people.
What type of counseling work was that?
So I'm not going to say it was conversion therapy, but it was like the generational cleansing stuff and the prophetic stuff. So I was considered a prophet in the church because I could hear God's voice and very accurately, funnily enough, which is now absolutely mad to me because I'm such a cynic.
No, that's actually really interesting. My family's very heavy in that world. Wait, can we actually dig into that a little bit? Finish your train of thought, but I want to go back into that in a second because that's really interesting.
My train of thought basically ends at people outside of the church. If you've been in the church and you leave the church, it's very hard to then kind of figure out what you're about, and because you don't have that automatic mission and purpose given to you, and there's greater responsibility if you are that way inclined, which I am, to then find the thing which is kind of what you felt like you were put on the planet to do. So I've still got, and I'm sure other people have, all this spiritual energy of purpose and mission, but I had nowhere to put it, and I felt very disadvantaged trying to now figure that out at a later point in my life.
Gosh, I can relate so much to that feeling, like, because there's a beautiful thing in faith of purpose and meaning, and I don't believe we're meant to live on this earth, or even meant is something I struggle with now, but it feels like there's so much inside us that wants to do something important and meaningful, and whether it's help people or make a difference, or like help feed people or help countries with people in need, it's really, the church gives you so much feeling of solving that or like using that, and you lose that, and it feels really, it's really sad. That's it's a loss, and then picking that up after. But no, I did want to go back to your story because you've got a very interesting life. I didn't know that fully. So wait, I want to get back into the rest of your story. So you are, we're kind of in your college years. So you're going through all these conversion therapy programs. They're like lightweight conversion therapy, like, light is what they're reframing it to make it less offensive, but it is the same thing. It's just less organized, and the organized versions were easier to take down. So if we keep it really subtle, like Bethel's doing this, there's a lot of other ministries, and there's a thing in Nashville right now. Not Nashville, but there's a state in this here that's trying to reallow it to be done in a clinical level, possibly. Yeah. It's on the news. I just didn't remember the details. But so you're fully going through these programs. So if I could, like, just a little tidbit for people that don't know what this is like, what are some of the things they're telling you about your sexuality? What are some of the processes you're doing in these programs while you're going through it? Yeah,
so they're telling you that your sexuality is the way it is because the devil's trying to trap you or trip you up. The reason you're experiencing it is because maybe you had an absent father or an abusive father, or there was an emotional lack in your childhood, or they're telling you it's because someone in your generational line, so your family history, engaged in some form of sin. Maybe that might have been sexual sin, it might have been homosexual sin, it might have been something else, but that opened the doorway for the devil, the demons, to start attacking you and impacting your life, and that's why you're experiencing this temptation of sexuality, of homosexuality. So what you do with a lot of that is you have to renounce and repent on behalf of yourself and anybody you've even looked at lustfully or thought about or found attractive or even seen. And then you have to do that on behalf of not only yourself but also your entire generational line. So there's these kind of scripted prayers that you have to read out, and then depending on how spiritual your group are, they'll be casting out demons, they'll be welcoming the angels, they'll be pulling stuff out of you, you'll be going to different heavenly realms and experiencing different things in those heavenly realms and getting insight from the spiritual world and different spiritual beings about why you are the way that you are and what you need to do to undo that.
And you're going through this, and did you feel like it was working?
I felt like everything I experienced was completely real. And I hoped it would work, but the reality is I'd have a very heavy session. Sometimes they were 3 hours, sometimes it was a whole day. I go back to my hotel room exhausted, and all I'd want to do was open my laptop and look at some particular things.
Heavy petting.
Yeah. But then I was also convinced that if I ever looked at porn or anything on my laptop or my phone, that was then contaminated and I needed to get rid of it or anoint it with oil to cleanse it again.
You went through a lot of laptops that were coated in oil at that point.
One a week, yeah.
One a week. Oh man, that's expensive. This conversion therapy was costing you a lot, not just in the regular cost. Wait, so you're going through this and you're hoping there's change and probably inside maybe feeling like maybe this will work, maybe that will work. And I imagine feeling some disappointment. And what's your internal emotional state during these processes? How are you feeling? Are you hopeless, hopeful? What's going on there?
Well, it's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? Because I'm not doing it solo. So there's always somebody else there. And so they're working hard to help you. And they are working hard to help you. There's a lot of energy and everything that goes into it. And so they're super hopeful. And so you don't want to let them down. So of course I'm a people pleaser, particularly historically, working on it. But as a people pleaser, you want to then at the end of that session be like, that was amazing. I can really feel like something shifted. I feel lighter. Something's different now. Thank you so much. And so I feel like I was just getting more and more disconnected from reality and more disconnected from truth and more disconnected from my own emotions, which I think is when I finally stepped away from the church. And even now, sometimes I really struggle to really know what is it that I want in this situation, in this moment, because I was always looking to please somebody else and make sure they got what they needed from that situation, that moment.
Well, I think that's kind of a church thing to put other people first, and so much so that you often lose sight of your own self and your own health. That's quite common. And especially like if you're in ministry, we're meant to sacrifice, and a lot of pastors, that's why a lot of pastors' kids are struggling, because their family often sacrifices everything for the Lord and sometimes neglects the family. Wait, but so at this point, when did you start? So you're talking about when you were finally done, but before that, you started actually teaching this stuff. So had you gone through the program at such a level that you thought, okay, I'm good enough, and then you stopped doing the program and then you started teaching it? Or is it like you're going through this cleansing the whole time and you're also teaching it while you're cleansing?
Yes, teaching it whilst also cleansing, because the cleansing work was never done right, because I never stopped wanting
never
to
found a woman.
heavy pet. So yeah, it was about 18, 19 years old, I think 19 years old when I went, 18 years old when I started to go through that process for myself. And that's what kicked up a lot of awareness that actually there was some stuff that happened to me in childhood, some repressed memories started coming out and that kind of thing. So I knew there was stuff I needed to work on, and then started working on sexuality as well for years, probably 6-7 years. I was going through gradual conversion therapy, inner healing work, generational deliverance, all of that fun stuff. So I was teaching that stuff as well from the age of about 19, 20, and delivering that from the age of 19 as well, internationally, which is where I kind of built up this reputation at being very, very good at it and being a prophet and hearing the voice of God and all of that sort of thing.
Did they market? So you were a prophet. My family's all, my parents are prophets. So I'm very, very close to this. Did your were you labeled as post-gay at all? Was that part of your story out there along with that? Did they use you as a poster for that?
No. Because I was never out as gay, it never got brought out as gay.
So you were in quiet, you were taking people through counseling that was about this, but your part of the journey wasn't necessarily out. So
Correct.
here you are. That's actually really interesting. I feel like there's been some other leaders, and I don't know what it is about gay men, but a lot of us find ourselves in leadership positions in the church. And I don't know if it's our sensitivity, whatever, or our good looks, who knows. But they, God, I'm saying so many things that sound really vain. I'm not vain, not usually. Just deeply internally, we're all a little bit. But shoot, I keep losing my train of thought. But it's interesting. There's other leaders in the church that I've heard of, especially in the prophetic movement, that have been gay men. Like, there's like a big one that I think is going to come out recently that is a gay man who's like massive in the prophetic community. And I'm like, what is that? So here you are, like this prophetic, like young, brilliant person, and they're like, you're secretly super gay, but you're pretending like you're not at all. And wait, what kind of prophetic ministry were you doing? Were you like on stage calling people out, like praying for healing? What kind of stuff?
All of that, yeah. So, and this is what's weird, right? Because I would stand on stage and I would, I'd be super accurate. I would go into businesses and tell them what was going on in the business, and I'd be accurate. I'd work for some wealthy people and be an intercessor for them, and I'd get accurate stuff come up. Like random stuff. Like I worked for someone who owned a hotel, and I was like, you're going to get investigated next week, get ready. Like that sort of stuff comes through, and guess what, next week. And I stand back and I'm like, I don't understand, like this makes no sense to me. Like, how was I so accurate? I remember this one story where I was asked to speak at a church in Hawaii, and I had to prophesy over everyone. You know how it goes. They line everyone up, you give a prophetic word, the pastor pushes them over, and then they bring the next one in. So the last woman, as I'm praying for her and receiving the word of God, I just get told in my head that her husband's left her and she's sleeping alone and no one in the church knows. I was like, flipping heck, right, okay. So again, how do you know that? How do I don't understand how I know that. And I pray this prayer so she knows that I know, but no one else does. And she comes after me after and says, how did you know that my husband's left me? I was like, I don't know how I know, but I just do. So I've got loads of examples of this really accurate awareness beyond my own awareness. It just does. That is something I still grapple with today because I don't really understand where that came from or how.
Gosh, that's a whole other conversation because I have had that same question. Because, and my mom watches this, so my mom's a fantastic person, but we were in prophetic culture, and she would prophesy very similar to what you did. And I would do it too. I was just a kid, and I was a teenager, but I'd prophesy over people, and some of it felt really like on point. I was channeling something. And then you have those experiences, and now you watch a lot of Christianity and faith do things that just sit so poorly in your spirit that you know that there's things about it that cannot be true and do not equate with love or any of these things that you associate with Christianity. And then you come out and you're like, you realize their teachings on gay existence are so heavily confused and flawed. And then you have to reconcile all this, and you're like, what the hell do I do with that? Like, I'm very similar in the same boat where I think that's why I'm still like somewhat spiritual, in that it's hard to put the Christian label on myself. Sorry, I'm talking about me, but whatever.
That's right.
I can't help myself because this is like you're hitting some things that are really relevant to me in my life, and I'm just like, how do I don't want to be labeled as a Christian because Christianity as a foundation, it's almost like a political party at this point. I don't want to be associated with, but deep down, I still have those spiritual moments that feel very real, and there's moments like that what felt very like undeniable, and so I'm still reconciling that. So you're having all these moments, but then you're feeling God, you're doing all these things, but I'm guessing inside there's getting to a point where you're, as you were saying, you're getting pretty miserable. There's just not a lot of hope for the actual change, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've heard of the Elijah list, which is like a big prophetic thing. Yes. So when I say I was involved, I was published on Elijah list as a prophet. Yeah. So
my parents were also published in the Elijah list, like every few weeks.
Yeah, it's
they watched our worlds are very, very close in this one. That's hilarious. Sorry.
So I don't know how I reconcile it either. And I think that a lot of those experiences made me feel very close to God. And then I'd always feel automatically depressed after, because I was like, how can I be that close to God and yet I'm still battling this? How can I hear God's voice so clearly and yet I'm being told that this part of who I am is absolutely abhorrent to the Lord? It just doesn't make any sense to me. I can't grapple those two things together. So you start to become quite dissociative. And I started living definitely two separate lives. And I think without knowing it, I found myself making an escape plan from the church. So I found myself getting a real job, and I worked in retail on the shop floor whilst I was doing my master's, actually. And then worked my way up from there into head offices, and that's where I kind of met people that weren't Christian, but who were really nice people. And I felt like I learned a lot about what it meant to love people from my non-Christian friends. And I was like, this is really starting to unravel now. Everything I've been told about the world and everything I've been made to believe about the world, that they're not happy, that they're secretly miserable. Even if they look happy on the outside, they can't be happy because they don't have Jesus. I was like, these people are having a great time. They're happy. They've got good relationships. They're kind. They're nice. They're all of those things. They've got more fruits of the Spirit than a lot of my Christian community actually have. So what's going on here? And so all of these things started to unravel as I became more and more dissociated and more miserable. And yeah, that's kind of, it was a downhill trajectory very quickly in my mid early 20s.
Yeah. I think, what would you say are the prime factors in the misery? Was it like, are you feeling self-hatred? Are you feeling lonely? Or is it a combination?
Yeah, I was definitely getting to that point of where do I fit? Because I'm still far too bought into Christianity to truly fit in with my non-Christian friends. I'm feeling more and more uncomfortable amongst my Christian friends, so I'm feeling more and more uncomfortable in my church identity because I feel like a hypocrite and a liar and all of those sorts of things. So I started to feel quite isolated from everyone. I was still hiding my identity from my family, and my family just knew me as this super religious person who'd sacrificed them on behalf of church and God, because they weren't particularly religious. So yeah, I mean, it was a very, very isolating place to be.
Oh man, so your family wasn't even encouraging you to stay in the closet, or did your family know that you were gay at this point?
No, I remember walking through a supermarket car park when I was 18, and my mum said, "Are you gay?" And I was like, "No, I do not like cock, Mum. Stop asking me." Was my actual answer. So yeah. So, but from that point, they didn't ask me. So. Yeah. I think when I was growing up, they probably had questions and wondered and thought maybe, but I'd been so in this church track and so in the denial of that, and they'd seen me have a couple of girlfriends, although they never lasted very long, that they, I think, stopped asking the question.
So you found this very heavy, and I've been to the UK a lot, like there are not as many people that are gung-ho religious. It's not that common. So your family's probably very mellow, probably faith on some level, but then you going to a place where you can't be gay is probably something they're not even into. So you found all of this, got super passionate, kind of all on your own.
Yeah.
And then force yourself to be in this environment where you weren't accepted as fully you, which is just a horribly unfortunate turn of events for you.
Yeah. But again, wouldn't change it for anything. But in one sense, totally created my own misery, my own cage, without realizing that's what I was doing. I think my parents went to church when I was younger, just a normal Church of England church. So I would say they're kind of Christian by culture versus necessarily having a super strong faith. So we didn't read the Bible, we didn't pray at home, none of that stuff. We didn't have Christian conversations or anything. Although my parents are very moral people and have really strong values. But my godfather was gay, so they had gay friends. It wasn't an issue to them whatsoever. It was something I kind of chose for myself, and as I got older, the impact of that got worse. But I wouldn't change any of it because I do feel like the church gave me an absolutely phenomenal foundation of many different things, as I'm sure it did for you as well. But yeah, so when I was then in my mid-20s, I met a boy and decided to actually try dating him, and that went not very well because it was a very toxic relationship. As I think a lot of people's first gay relationship tends to be very toxic, and as I've matured and healed from that over the years, I've realised that actually he wasn't necessarily that toxic, but us combined was a very toxic experience for both of us. We both had issues that did not work well with one another, and so that forced me to come out to my parents and then have to step away from the church. But before I dated him, I think I'd met him at this point, I can't entirely remember, but I remember basically been crying myself to sleep for quite a while most nights, and I realised that I needed to do that Christian thing of counting the cost of following Jesus. And as I counted the cost and I looked at how miserable I was, and I kind of looked at the future misery if I continued in this way, I was like, that's not actually a cost I'm willing to pay. I don't think that's a cost that a loving God would want me to pay. And I was getting really pissed off with some of my Christian friends who knew I was struggling with my sexuality, and they said, well, it's just the sacrifice you're going to have to make for following Jesus. And I went, well, explain to me what sacrifice you're making. You're straight, you get to have sex, you get to do all these things. What sacrifice are you actually making to follow Jesus? I don't see it. I was like, it's not comparable. There's not a comparable sacrifice there whatsoever. So that pissed me off and helped contribute to the decision to walk away.
Yeah, it's funny that like you finally got to that point and really looked at that, because I probably, like, when you're thinking that maybe you'll change, it's almost like they keep it all a little blurry, and it's not like clearly outlined what the church believes you should have to do to be like what you should do as a gay person in the church. Yeah. Like, some of them are like, you're not actually gay, it's just a demon, or some are like, you are gay but you're going to be celibate forever, or but it's kind of all obscured. And I think it's just blurry enough that no one has to really look at what our existence will be like in the church, and they cannot have to face how uncomfortable and unhappy it is for us. Yeah. But if you're a person that thinks, you eventually come to that point you said right there, that I've also asked people, why do you think my sacrifice is supposed to be like this? And why would God, like, whether we're a failure of genetics or something, like what are we doing here? Why do we have these inclinations and have the perfect capabilities to love someone fully, and yet we're meant to suffer and not only just not have any feelings and not get to have romance, we're meant to have this romance right in front of us as some sort of horrible joke, and we can't act on it, or we're going to hell. Like, how does anyone look at that and not feel really confused about God's plan for us? Yeah. It is confusing, and that's why it doesn't make sense. And again, it's that thing of over-fixating on one sin over another one. Like, why is this one? And I've heard people say, well, if you're gay, you're disconnected from God, you can't connect with God. Okay, well, I was doing it for quite a while, and I was doing pretty well at it. So, were you doing prophetic stuff while you were dating? No, not while I was dating, no. But I had a few experiences, shall we say, whilst I was still in the church. And God was still blessing your prophetic? Still blessing me. I even remember one of my friends saying, I don't understand, Lewis, you must be ridiculously favoured and anointed by God, because you've just done that thing, and he's still healing people through you, he's still speaking through you, he's still all of this sort of stuff. And I was like, just little old me. It is a fascinating thing, huh? If that is a spiritual thing. And what that leads me to think is, like, we don't fully, I don't know spiritual. I'm on this journey myself where I'm just like, I'm not sure where I'm at, to be honest. Especially, it's just funny because I have a faith podcast, but it's very, I'm not going to like BS, but you are doing those things. And there's things that are like very, like, feel spiritual, like whether you're connecting to their hearts or connecting, like there's stuff we don't understand. There's so much science we don't even know about, like the way that sound travels and the way we're all kind of connected. There's connections between us. Whether it's God or what's happening, like there's something going on. And it feels like in these spiritual moments, we're really tapping into that. But whatever you're tapping into, was not affected by you being queer and you having looked at something queer or kissed a boy the day before. Whatever was spiritually flowing through you was flowing through you just fine, while you're fully, as they would say, doing something demonic. So that is a fascinating question for anyone in the prophetic world that thinks gay people are all sin.
It reminds me of one of my favorite Bible verses during this time. And it's in Colossians, I believe. It's been a while since I read it, so forgive me. It basically says, in your own minds, you were enemies to God because of your sinful behavior. And I loved that verse because if you actually, well, for me, if I break it down, it's in your own mind, in your own perception, you're an enemy to God. And the thing which made you feel like you're an enemy to God is because of your sinful behavior. But that's a perception, it's not a reality. So in your own minds, in your own perception, you're an enemy to God because of your sinful behavior. So the sinful behavior is kind of neither here nor there. And isn't that why Jesus died anyway? If we're really going to go through the whole biblical thing, Christ died and washed away everybody's sin, regardless if they pray a particular prayer that's been carefully crafted by some prophet to make sure you wipe away your rubbish and your sin and your this and that. Well, no, he's already done it. The job's already done. So why are we still forcing this spiritual warfare narrative? It stopped making sense for me.
A lot of really good questions. I think it's something beautiful about the journey you've had where you were so deep in everything and had this super good spiritual journey, but now you're very healthily living in a gay marriage, like fully having all of that and being a very balanced, intelligent individual. I think that's a great story, great journey. I think a lot of people that see and hear this are probably going to really wonder how you can be so balanced after going through all that. And so mad respect to you. You obviously did have some good counselors in the middle of all the craziness.
And a very patient husband, because it was not always balanced. And the first 6 months for him was hell.
Yeah. Well, because especially when you've got so much loaded in, I imagine, so many ideas.
Exactly. It wasn't fun to begin with at all. So lots of mistakes, lots of pushing through, lots of reflecting, lots of questioning your own behavior, but also holding all of my opinions very, very lightly and all of my beliefs very, very lightly. And I think most of the world could do a better job of that, because yes, it may be your belief, it may be your opinion, you may be emotionally charged about it, but who knows how you're going to think about that same thing in 10 years' time. So hold your beliefs lightly and allow other people to hold theirs lightly as well.
Yeah, and I think that's something that religion doesn't really encourage, is thinking different. Even within your little sects of religion, you're not really thinking, what could this different denomination have that I don't? And you're not even allowed to think that far. Fascinating. Yeah, so you finally, I guess, to get back to the end of your story, so you finally, were dating, you kind of slowly pulled out of the church. You're finishing your theology degree. And as you're dating, are your ideas just slowly shifting in that you're opening up to the idea of sexuality? Or are you feeling kind of shame and confusion while you're dating and fighting in the middle of all that?
Yeah, it was definitely, dating might have been too polite a word for what I was getting up to when I finally let go. But there was a lot of shame attached to that. There's a lot of fear attached to that. There was a lot of a lot was going on with all of that, and then also feeling like I was devaluing myself, and because of a lot of the rhetoric in the church as well, I found it very hard to enjoy sex post event, because I was like, oh no, I've done something. And also when I was in the church, it was like an orgasm was a bad thing if it was done outside of marriage. So even in my early teens, it was like, I can do it up until this point, but if I have an orgasm, then I've gone too far. That's what breaks the rules. So if I ever would have an orgasm in a experience with somebody, I'd feel like I'd gone too far, and all of that stuff would be there as well in the emotional backlog that I had to try and work through. And that took years to get through. Really, really did take years to get through. And I think sometimes still rears its head. I don't think any of this stuff is you're suddenly over it forever. Certain times things feel more real, certain other times they don't bother me whatsoever. Sometimes, I mean, even before getting married, and even sometimes now when feeling married, although it happens less, I wonder if God's going to suddenly come and grab me and rescue me and save me from this gay lifestyle, and make me realise that I am straight, and this was just the demons, and then I've ruined somebody else's life, and I have all this panic because I'm an overthinker kick in as well. So all of that stuff was going on before I got married. So I am fairly balanced now, but I'm not without my wobbly days, which do come every now and then, but nowhere near as much as they used to.
Yeah, it's interesting. That stuff takes so long to unlearn, and when you spiritualize it, it's almost like you're spiritualizing fear, you're spiritualizing like embarrassment, shame, whatever. And so you put that on a pedestal and you're like, oh, this feeling that this is like bad or wrong is God. And all of a sudden it's not a war with your own body even. It's like a spiritual whatever. And it takes you out of the natural logic of, oh, I've been told that this was bad since I was age 5. But then you also realize like, oh, I've been told watching a scary movie was bad and I felt shamed about that.
And Harry Potter.
Obviously, and Harry Potter. And you're like, okay, that actually, I think that's one of the things that helped me is like, that's the same kind of feeling I'm getting when I'm having like this kind of encounter. It's the same thing of like when I watch Harry Potter for the first time, I'm just like, am I possessed? Am I watching something bad? And some people that watch this that are Christians are be like, well, yeah, because Harry Potter is still demonic. But like, I've not even like something not Harry Potter, something like super PG, I would still feel bad about it because I was so guilt trained at 5 years old. But so you're kind of, so it took you a long time to sort through that. And then you're able to recognize what's what. And now you feel like you're married now. So you're doing it in wedlock, which, you know, you're fully on some level doing a good Christian thing, minus the people that would say you're not. But have you kind of shaken those feelings of not like, what if I'm secretly like ruining some, you know what I mean? What you're just saying. What if you're like secretly helping someone else be demon possessed, etc.?
Yeah, to a point. I mean, it helps that my husband has been gay his whole life, so I'm not taking
as opposed to you, who you just became gay recently.
Exactly. Yeah, just decided one day because we choose this lifestyle because I chose that trauma because that's exactly what I wanted. So I do I still worry about that? Yes, I do sometimes. I think a weird thing for me is the kid element. So me and my husband like the idea of having kids one day, more so him than me, but I used to be really, really wanting kids. And in the church, they were like, I've got prophetic words about my kids. So there's all this like extra baggage and weight around what it would mean for me to have kids. And then can I bring kids into the world, and do they need a mum and a dad, and what's all of that about? So that's just another level. But that I still have things that I worry about based on what I used to believe.
Yeah, I think it's layers that you unpack at a time. I think we're all learning and figuring out what we actually want and feel good about. But I don't know, I love well, first off, like your journey is like so parallel to mine. That's like, I'm fascinated, very interesting. But it's really cool seeing someone with such a good grounding and strong faith journey, but also just having such like a good, happy, healthy homosexual life. That sounds funny, but yes, that's what I mean. Like I really admire I guess the spirit you carry is what I'd say. You have a really good energy. Just sounds so frou-frou, but you have a good energy to you. And I'm happy that you're speaking out and sharing your story. I feel like you have a lot to say and a lot of sound advice. There's a reason you are on stages speaking because, you're good at it, and I hope to see you more in this space.
Thank you. I mean, I said it before, but it doesn't. Some of those battles are very hard won, very, very hard won. And I just think anybody who is in a context like I was in, it does get better. I mean, we hear that all the time, but it does. But it will probably get worse before it gets better. So you do need to be conscious of, well, it's worth it. It's worth it because the alternative is to live a hidden life for the entirety of your life, and that's not good for anybody. Yeah,
I think it's just impossible to I so rarely have seen situations where people are suppressing this in the church and have a happy, complete life. And I know there's some stories of some people that have interesting journeys, but the vast majority of us, this is not, there's not a way to live. You can't suppress this.
No.
It simply doesn't.
And you talked about fearing destroying someone's life. I was very conscious that if I hid this part of myself and forced myself to get married to a woman and forced myself to have kids with a woman, that I would have ended up going and doing this stuff on the side anyway. And if that ever got discovered, that would have blown up in a way worse way than me just going and living true to myself now. Actually causes less damage than what could have happened and would have happened.
I was also encouraged to just figure it out with women. And yeah, you've probably talked to I've talked to a lot of people now that have had that exact journey where they got married and had kids, and some like 50 years old, and they're like, yeah, I did this for my wife as a service.
Yeah.
Like 30 years of having relations with someone that you are not attracted to, like, that is a cruel and unusual punishment. And anyone that thinks that's God's plan, I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument of how beautiful that is, that we can do that as human beings for the benefit of somebody else, but it's not beautiful. It's not. We aren't Jesus. We're not the Messiah. We don't need to sacrifice ourselves like that for the benefit of one other person on this planet. No, surely they would have been better off being loved by a straight man who would love, appreciate, value, and find attractive and make them feel like a goddess, not someone who is forced to once a month or on your birthday to have a fumble. It's not good for anybody. It's just not good for anybody at all.
No, absolutely. And a lot of these women have never had done anything because they're good Christian girls. And so they're like, oh yeah, fine, I'll be with this gay man that like doesn't really seem to be interested in me physically, and not really realize what they're sacrificing, because when you're actually having great physical intimacy with someone, it's beautiful. But that usually includes someone, like the most attractive thing about that is when that person just wants you so bad.
Yeah.
And imagine not having that and just having a person that's just like, whatever, and just let's do the thing. Let's make a child. Dear God.
Completely. And I mean, I know of situations where this has happened and that it's warped, because the woman then thinks she's serving God by saving this gay person from whatever they're saving them from. It's just so messed up. So messed up.
It's layers, and it's tragic. I wish I could just lay this all out in like a PDF to send to every church and be like, hey, this is what happens when we do this and tell gay people to do this. Like, can we actually talk about all this? Because it seems like all of this happens kind of swept under the rug, blurs it. And most of the churches, at least in America, will say, don't be gay, and don't have answers for any of these very interesting questions like, what do you actually want us to do? Should we be single our whole lives? Do you want us to marry a woman and lead her to misery? Like, what the hell do you actually want from us?
Yeah.
But, logic doesn't always encouraged by religion, as we have spoken on.
It does not. It does not.
Yeah. But thank you. Was there anything else you wanted to say? I feel like this is a really great chat. I am very engaged and enjoying it. I can talk to you for a long time, but we're at about the hour mark, so I usually cut it off then. Is there anything else you wanted to say to people that are listening to this, or do you feel like you've covered it?
I think I've covered a lot of it, but if anyone does have any questions or just needs to talk or whatever, then feel free to hit me up on Instagram. It's where I spend most of my life. So if you like pictures of random food, varying degrees of healthiness, then that's good as well.
Yeah, and like, okay, so how would we find you? I'd love to promo. I know this is a lot different than your financial advice, but I'm sure there's some people on here that also would love to follow you there. So could we get your channels? And I can link you on YouTube, of course, and all that at the bottom in the bio. Sure,
amazing. So Instagram is @with WITH Lewis Crompton. So my name, LEWIS CROMPTON, which I'm sure will be on the show notes. And then my YouTube channel is actually the same as that, so it's also @with Lewis Crompton. Those are the two main places I operate. So yeah, come and say hello. Be nice to meet you all.
Yeah, and wait, and you primarily talk about getting finances in order and future planning. Is that correct? I've watched a little bit.
Yeah. So I mean, it's about to change, to be honest, a little bit. So I had a bit of a moment in my garden the other day, and questioning what's my purpose, what am I doing, what's my mission. And this is going to sound so, well, this is my own belief system. It's not actually counter to what we're talking about here, but it feels a little bit counter at this stage. I'm trying to wrestle with that. But I've realised what I really want to do is help families with their finances, because if we help families with their finances, we actually protect family units. And if we protect family units and help them stay together, because divorce is often by financial problems, then we actually protect kids. And I actually really want to create safe environments where kids can feel protected to fully be themselves, which is where it really does work with this, because there isn't this odd pressure on the parents and this financial stress on the parents. So that's one of my major goals. But really I talk about money stuff in general, so you don't have to have kids or a family. I don't have kids at this stage in my life, doesn't mean we can't help those people. So yeah, the stuff I talk about is investing and being good with your money, and also getting annoyed at the government for terrible financial decisions and policy.
Amen. I think we can all get behind that. Oh, thank you. Yeah, definitely check that out if you're watching this and you need any of that. I'll be checking some stuff out. Well, thank you again. Really appreciate the vulnerability. Your story is really good, and honestly, like, love what you have to say about this space. I can relate so much. So really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure.